You're listening to the Small Business Talk podcast with Cathy Smith. Episode 15.
Small Business Talk is a podcast for business owners and entrepreneurs who want a better way to run their businesses without spending years doing it the hard way. Small Business Talk is hosted by Cathy Smith, who has run the same marketing agency for more than 17 years and helped hundreds of business owners achieve their marketing goals.
I'm so glad you could join us. Today, I am talking to Lisa Kniebe. Lisa is from Lisa Kniebe Consulting. And Lisa's topic today is your business adventure, moving beyond limiting self-belief and into the freedom of possibilities. Welcome, Lisa.
Hi, Cathy. Thanks so much for having me.
So, business adventure. I hear you've been overseas recently. Would you like to tell us about that?
Yeah, I sure would. I have recently come back from Africa, Tanzania, where I've embarked on a huge adventure climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. I'm only really just back in body and mind, back into my business, and my brain was still on the mountain.
Wow, that is definitely adventure, and we'll get into that a little bit more later. So what is your business, Lisa? What do you do in the realm of consulting?
I help to bring words to life for people in their business. We all, speak and talk and write every day, and more of our communication is happening online, which means we have to start sort of putting those conversations into the written format. And I'm really the wordsmith and magician that helps people to see where their content can lead them and also help refine the skills to articulate themselves better in writing.
Excellent. I'm a web designer and you see some really awful content out there, so we definitely need people like yourself. What was the prompt for you to climb Kilimanjaro?
Oh, that's an interesting one. Basically, myself and my husband have always been in a really adventurous couple, and we've raised our children into a life of adventure. But this was our biggest one yet. And I found that as my children were younger, I had that need to protect and make them safe. And that really curtailed my own desire for adventure for quite some time. So as the kids were getting older into their teens, my husband said, right, I've got our next family adventure, which is Kilimanjaro. And that was 5 years ago. And at that point, I just said, no way, you can count me out, not a chance. That is not who I am. That is not where I want to take my kids. I do not see myself doing that. That catalyst was actually resistant. The first encounter with Kilimanjaro was this sense of no way. And that really made me reflect on who am I? What am I all about? What do I stand for? And why is this no way? So that sort of limiting belief that I created for myself around who I was. Now I was a mum. Once I started to unpick that, Kilimanjaro went on my vision board, and slowly I grew into the vision. And this year we saw that culmination happen.
Wow, that is so exciting. So I guess for the Small Business Talk listeners, that's something that a lot of our listeners do have, is that self-limiting belief. So did you want to talk a little bit about that in regards to business?
Yeah, sure. I think one of the things that most surprised me in my business journey was that it wasn't the skill set and it wasn't the knowledge and it wasn't even the connections and the lead generation that's been the biggest challenge in my business. It was the limiting self-beliefs around what I thought I could do, what I thought I should do, and who I thought I should be to other people. That was so powerful that it can keep you playing small, which is a bit of a buzzword, but the reality is you've got a comfort zone, and your self-talk and the stories you tell yourself about who you are and what you should be doing and could be doing keep you in that comfort zone. And in business, it's a very uncomfortable process to start pushing through that and saying, I can be more and I have a bigger goal. And often we feel like, who am I to have this? Who am I to say that adventure is a mindset? And really, it's the mindset of adventure in our business and also in our life journey that changes the game. I launched Lisa Kniebe Consulting at the end of last year after being in Stella Polaris copywriting. And that was a huge transition from being behind a business name that stood in front of me and allowed me to be somewhat hidden, to being Lisa Kniebe saying, I am enough as I am. And that was a big transition that challenged those limiting beliefs.
Absolutely. That's brilliant and excellent. One of our recent podcasts was episode 12, just one with me, and I spoke about imposter syndrome, which a lot of our listeners can relate to. And like you say, it's not the skill set, it's the mindset that holds most of us back. Yeah, great advice. You decided that you would go to Kilimanjaro. So what was the next step to actually making it happen?
There was the mindset element, which is what I talked about really with the vision board, embodying the dream. Then the change in terms of, once you realize this is really going to happen, we booked the trip. It's then a case of training and preparing, realizing that, again, there's limiting beliefs around, I need to be a super fit gym junkie to do this. That's not who I am. I'm just a regular mum who likes a glass of wine, enjoys her food, and hanging out with the kids around the barbecue. Suddenly, I had to confront, how am I going to be fit enough to do this? So that was my next challenge, was training. So I did a lot of training for the event. And we just literally went to Serpentine Falls near where I'm based, near Mandurah. Did the Kitty's Gorge walk. That was every weekend at 6 a.m. And we just diligently did that Saturday and Sunday morning as fast as we could. So physically getting ready for the climb, and then mentally getting ready for the feat of endurance that was going to be to come. So yeah, that was the first step to making it, first of all, mindset embodiment, and then a physical embodiment to be ready.
So how long does it actually take you to do the trek, sort of from woe to go?
Well, you've got a couple of options. So like any mountain, there's multiple sort of entry points onto the mountain, which dictate how long you'll be on there. We chose the one that has the longest route, but it's also going to give you the best chance of reaching the summit with the altitude that you're going to be walking at. The minimum is, I think, 5 days, and we chose an 8-day trek. We had longer period of hardship and, endurance, but also a greater period of acclimatization, because ultimately you're getting to 5,895 meters high. So you've got an extreme altitude conditions, which are really very dangerous.
That is incredible. You don't really get the whole idea of how high you have to be. By choosing the longer one, did that mean that it was a less gradient? You went up slower than if you had have chosen one of the quicker routes?
I kind of wish I could say yes to that, but it was not what it did for you. So the gradient was incredibly steep. You had some really steep climbing days, and then you had some more plateau areas where you were walking across a different type of landscape. But what you did is that extra time allowed you to do acclimatization walks. They were the walks where we left camp in the morning and we climbed, say, for example, 4,600 meters high to a place called Lava Tower, because this is an old volcano. So there's lots of sort of marks of that around. At Lava Tower, you're feeling absolutely disgusting. And then they take you back down to 3,900 to sleep. You get to 3,900 after going, the higher altitude, and you suddenly feel marvelous. Whereas the day before, you'd got to 3,900 and felt disgusting. The acclimatization was very clear on your body, loss of appetite, all sorts of digestive issues, headaches, and just sort of that malaise. Those were the sort of common symptoms.
Wow. So it is a little bit like a business journey, isn't it? You need to plan out where you want to go. You need to have some goals in place and then work on your little milestones. And sometimes as you push through some of those milestones, you do actually feel sick and have to sort of vary to the side or drop back a little bit. So it sounds like it's very similar to a lot of people's business journeys.
Absolutely. And like you say, it's got so much resonance for business. One of the things that struck me most was as I set foot on that mountain, I didn't really believe I was going to make it to the summit. I just knew I wanted to try, which is really where we are in business. We set foot on our business journey and we don't know if we're going to make it to our goal, our greater goal. We just want to have a really good go. Also, you have to hold that vision in sight all the time whilst concentrating on the small, little achievable celebrations that you have every day. And on the mountain, that was as simple as sometimes just being able to breathe deeply, eat food, and sleep. So you really simplified what was a celebration, and it allowed you to feel that every day was a win, regardless of whether you made the summit. But you had to keep that summit as your greater vision. So it almost felt very, very similar to the business journey.
Perfect. And by having those 3 things you need to do can stop people's overwhelm, because we sit down to our desks or wherever we're working, we have 20 or 30 things on our to-do list and it's just too mind-boggling. But if we boil those down to the 3 must-dos each day and get those done, then regardless of whether you do the other 17, you've still had a win. You've got your highest priority tasks done. So that sounds very similar to a business journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of those little mantras is just staying really present and focused in the moment, because when you are starting to feel overwhelmed, you often start to look at all the many things spinning around you that you can't control. But if you stay very present and very grounded, feet on the floor in the desk, bottom in the seat, then just simply tackle that. Like you say, those 3 things, you've already started the day with a win. And, you cannot have a more positive mindset than that.
Perfect. That sounds great. Okay, so you're on the mountain. You've done your acclimatized walk. You've come back down and you're not feeling so bad. So what happened then? What was the next step in your journey?
There were really 2 milestone events. Midpoint was day 5 for us. We met something called the Barranco Wall. Now, the Barranco Wall is just an enormous rock face that you are going to climb, but it's not a rope climb. It's like a zigzag up of little rocky shelves and ledges. Those little zigzagging along means that you're climbing up over hand climbing. At one point, there's an enormous drop-off. There's a step that you need to do. And at this point, my guide said to me, we've come to Kissing Rock. And Kissing Rock, I thought, sounded really quite nice. But actually, by the time I realized what it was, I was straddled across an enormous drop-off, hands either side of this great big rock, and everyone just saying, just step. And that sense of utter fear, paralyzed by fear and absolutely overwhelmed by that need to step, knowing that if I didn't step, there was only going back. You had to step to go forward. So it was just this physical paralysis versus the mindset of just do it. And that leap of faith was so huge. There's a few tears on the way, I can tell you for sure. But once I'd got on the other side, I was like, I did that. I did that. So it was such a breakthrough moment. And again, so similar to the leaps of faith we take in our other journeys.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes that is, if you've put your name down to be a speaker or you've pushed yourself out of a business comfort zone in some way, you sort of stand on that edge of that rock going, can I make that next step? And it does become literally life and death in those kind of situations as well, where you either have to step and go out onto the stage, or you have to go back and go, well, I can't do that and I've let all these people down. So I can understand how that mindset of having to push yourself forward so that you can keep going, it really does relate to business as well.
Absolutely. That analogy of stepping onto the stage, so similar, because that sense of paralysis descends upon you. But one of the things that I had all along was the cheer squad. So my husband and my 2 sons, I was always going first. They were always behind me. And it was quite a sort of symbolic relationship, really, because the 3 of them are there literally championing my cause. Of course, in business, that's what we also need. We need our champions. Say, you can do this, and you don't always believe it yourself. Then they believed in you, that enabled you to make that leap. And then you do believe it.
Perfect. So how old are your sons?
The time of the climb, 15 and 18, pretty strong young men, although often I felt quite protective over them. They obviously saw me as the only woman of the trip and a lot smaller than them, and really felt my fear at times and my challenges. So, yeah, it was a great experience.
So that's great. So I guess in that sort of analogy too, it's your peer group, your support teams, when we're involved in the Chamber of Commerce or other networking groups where we have like-minded peers that can support us along the way. That's another thing for business. If you can get involved in somewhere where you have got some backup, some people that can be your cheer squad and cheering you along.
Yeah, absolutely. And the people that believe in you, often beyond what you believe in for yourself, those little champions are really there in your corner, seeing a vision of you that you don't always see for yourself. And it's having the faith in those people to say, yes, okay, I trust your judgment. I can do that thing. And in business, there's so many times where you haven't seen yourself in this place, but they see you there. They see the talent within that you're not yet expressing. So, yeah, I think that's so true for business.
Yeah, definitely. Because, sometimes we're our own worst critics and we're harsher on ourselves than everybody else is. And also sometimes it's good to have people that are a little bit further along the same kind of journey so they can then put themselves in your shoes and go, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, whatever the time frame is, I was there. So yes, Lisa, I can see that you could be here. Come on, just a little bit more, come on. So that's great.
So true. Yeah, that encouragement, absolutely. And it's so essential on all of these places where we feel challenged. But like you say, business is definitely one of them.
Great. Okay, so we've got across the kissing rock. We've stepped on the precipice. We've kept going. We've made it this far. Where do we go from here?
From here, it's to Basecamp. We've ascended the Barranco Wall. We've done a long trek into Basecamp. And Basecamp is 4,600 meters. So we're sitting pretty high up. And that time is all about self-care. You arrive about midday and you're going to have about 12 hours before you start your ascent to the summit. And the summit ascent starts at midnight, in the middle of the night. You know what you're going to face. So you know you're going to be facing freezing temperatures down to -20. Wind chill could be literally shifting your body as you walk. You're going to have frozen, the camelbacks you have for water, they'll freeze 3 hours in. You know you're going to be in Arctic temperatures at the top. You've obviously got the altitude because you're changing such a high level. That day is all about rest, recuperate, eat when you can eat, and rehydrate in preparation for this enormous next step in the journey, which is summit attempt.
Wow, that does sound rather chilling, actually.
Yeah.
So I guess that's in a lot of ways where people have been working on big projects in their business, or they've had something really major going on and they've been working a lot of hours and really pushing through, that they need to also stop and think about that self-care, drop the hours back, have some me time and really concentrate on themselves. Because if you're the main person in your business and you're not doing your own self-care, then you're not going to be able to help your staff or your customers either.
Yeah. And it was such an interesting correlation between self-care and success. If you hadn't hydrated enough, if you hadn't taken in as many calories as you could, if you hadn't got well rested as much as you could in that day, you were going to struggle to summit. I think that is such a similar parallel in business. When we don't put in the self-care, we do struggle to deliver on that final push, that final endurance. So yeah, absolutely closely linked to that.
And I think sometimes that's what people think. If they just keep going, if they don't stop, if they just keep pushing through, then they will be able to make it. But like you say, if they do that, that's actually setting themselves up for failure rather than success, because they haven't got the hydration and the nutrition that they've needed.
Exactly. Like you say, you do need to hunker down and give your body everything it needs and your mind some rest time before you take that big push. And often in businesses, we know there's a big push coming, like you say, big project delivery or, a conference we're going to or a speaking spot. We know we're going to put ourselves under immense stress and pressure. So let's take that time out beforehand to really rest well and just look after yourself.
Okay, so we're at Basecamp. We've rested. We've done our self-care. We're getting ready. It's almost midnight. What happens now?
So the knock on the tent and the anticipation and nerves are really high at this point because we know we're reaching the pinnacle of our journey. This is what we've been building to the whole time. There's no guarantees for anyone. So we have a strategy to begin with. And our strategy in our teams, we have 3 people coming to summit with us, 3 experienced guides and the 4 of us. So our strategy is to try to keep moving at all costs. So that means the tiniest, slowest step with the deepest breathing you can do. But at that shuffle, you'll just keep going as opposed to going a little faster and then regularly stopping. Before we started, we were like, yep, that sounds good. We have all our oxygen tested. We are running at about 70%. So remembering that, typically we want to be 99 to 100% on normal conditions. So we're already down. So we know it's going to be a tough call. And off we shuffle. And shuffle it really is. We've got our hiking poles and you take a tiny shuffle forward, take a breath. Another tiny shuffle forward, take a breath. Poles in, breath, shuffle, breath, and repeat. We did this, and ahead of us in the darkness, we could see every other climber's head torch. And those head torches just stretched literally to the stars. And we just headed to the stars because there was no differentiation between what was a star and what was a torch. And as we went, I really felt, and this is so similar to our business journeys, I'm at the back of the pack. We're at the back. We've started late. We're going too slow. Everybody else is ahead of us because we could see all of these little lights bobbing. And slowly but surely, we just kept to our strategy. We shuffled and we shuffled and we shuffled, and we did not stop. And it literally was 8 hours of shuffling up what felt like a vertical hill. And as we went, we passed people on the way. The people that had been ahead of us were now sitting, drinking a tea or resting. And we just shuffled past the tiniest shuffles. And those shuffles took us all the way to the top. And it was that hare and tortoise again, go at your own pace.
That's really great advice. I think that a lot of people look at people further ahead in their journey and they compare their beginning with somebody else's middle or end. Mm-hmm. And like you say, if you just keep putting one foot in front of the other, one foot in front of the other, do one little thing in your business each day to keep you moving forward, no matter how slow, you will actually get to that goal. Whereas the ones that have done the old hare run and gone out crazy and then stopped and then gone in some weird and wonderful direction, they don't always get to their goal. The lesson there is that you need a very clear goal, which was the summit. So in business, you need a very clear place to get to. You've got your minor goals, which are past the people sitting having tea, aiming for the stars, that sort of thing, and then just keep working towards it.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is a level of endurance required. In the climb element, there were times on that summit attempt where you were completely alone, except in physical proximity to one another. So there was no breath for talking. There was only breath for allowing your body to move. And that meant for 8 hours, you just breathed and walked and endured the level of discomfort that brings in those temperatures and in that tough challenge. And that was very telling because there's a lot of times in our business where we're completely alone as well. And we have to find something in our head that keeps us going. So on the way up, it was amazing because you were alone in your head for so many hours. You had to have a way to just keep yourself going and press through and take your mind off some of the discomfort that you were experiencing physically. And we all did that in different ways. My son's a massive football fan. He recited the Premier League teams, all 20 odd of them. And every time he made a mistake, he started from one again. My other son had a song he sang. My husband watched our footfalls to kind of obsessively monitor how people are going. And for me, I had a song that I was singing, which bizarrely, something from childhood that was a repeat song. So it's called Kumbaya, something I've not sung for years. But that night, that's all I did. It was rhythmic and repetitive. But it was that sense that when you really are down to the knuckle and you're absolutely on the bones of your backside, you will pull out all the stops to find those resilience that keeps you going. And sometimes it's a song from childhood.
And I think that's one of those kind of things as well, because that was something that was repetitive. So it's now become a habit, a subconscious. So you didn't actually have to think about it per se. It was just something that you remembered. Let's end the suspense. Did you get there?
We made it. Yes. You first get to the first milestone is Stellar Point, which I felt was very significant because my business is Stellar Polaris, my first business. And so I was like, Stellar Point, we've made it. And that was only then 45 minutes from the actual summit. So from Stellar Point, it's supposedly an easy stroll, except nothing's easy at that altitude. But we shuffled another 45 minutes. And at that point, then you're surrounded by the brutality of nature in Arctic conditions. So you've got the ice caps all around you and just the wind buffeting and this amazing sort of sign that says you've reached Ulu Peak. It's 5,895 meters high. What I didn't realize on the summit, though, is that don't stay there very long because it's such a dangerous high altitude. People are, kind of your brain is just getting imploded. The headaches kick in pretty fiercely. It's a quick photo at the summit to mark that occasion and then get you down as quick as you can, at least by sort of half an hour descent, at rapid descent, so that you can start to allow your brain and your body to expand. It's almost like everything gets compressed with no oxygen.
Okay, so it takes 8 hours to get up and half an hour to get down.
Not half an hour to get down, half an hour to just take some of that pressure off your brain, I think. It was actually about 4 hours to get down back to Basecamp. So it's literally double the time, sort of up to down. Going down though, it's like skiing. There is just you using your poles and you're just kind of skiing through the shale. That's a bit of an art in itself. But from there, then you've got about an hour's rest at Basecamp where you slept the previous half a night. And then another 5-hour descent. Even at 4,600 meters, it's too high to risk you there too long. So everybody needs to get down below 3,000 meters to try and allow the body to heal from that really quite, vicious exposure.
Wow. Okay, so you've done your summit, you've got down to your base camp and then continued down. How long did it take you to get back to the ground, to where you started?
So we exit on a different path and a much quicker path. So we literally walked that day we summited. So started at midnight, 8 hours up, 4 hours back to camp, and then another 5 hours down. Within, sort of 12 or 16 hours, we were off that mountain. It was so fast. That whole walk on that final day was the four of us just reflecting, wow, we did it. I can't believe it. So you start to believe something you thought was unbelievable. And then from there, you're also reflecting on, wow, what did that mean? And how amazing was that? And do you remember this? And what about that? And so I think that reflection time has been so significant to share that with others and to have that time to reflect and celebrate together.
And certainly as a family. And Audrey Hepburn was the one that coined it way, way, way back, that impossible is actually I am possible. So what a perfect revelation. You've got down off the mountain. Then how long did you take to recover before you sort of headed out of the area and then came home?
Yeah, it's interesting because we felt that the recovery would be quite quick. We anticipated as soon as you're off the mountain, your body's no longer under altitude, deprivation of oxygen, and you're going to be fine. But actually, half of your digestive bacteria got wiped out at altitude. It took about a month physically for me to recover. So we already flew back to Australia. I was back home and back in business while I was physically on the mend from impacts of altitude. Well, luckily, not too many blisters, aching legs and exhausted, no showers for 8 days and all of that. That was immediately dealt with as soon as we got back to our accommodation and had the comforts of home again. There were some lasting effects that we definitely needed to look after ourselves as we came off the mountain and back into Australia, really sort of look after our bodies to recover fully.
You don't hear about that sort of thing, do you? You hear of people training beforehand, but you don't hear a lot of the recovery. Did you do some physical recovery as well? Did you have to keep doing walks and extra stretching and that kind of thing too?
Yeah, look, a good amount of stretching, and also we reduced our walking from training walking to dog walking. We settled the walking down. It had to be regular. Looking after the gut health, that was really important. Like I say, the altitude plays absolute havoc with your digestion and your gut bacteria. So that's taken a while and made total sense when you realise just your physical outer body, you've got an inner world going on of microbes that needs oxygen. But it's been great. Like I say, I felt like I spent February on the mountain still just processing what had happened and those big shifts that occurred during the journey and how that was then going to play out going forward.
That is just such an amazing journey and such a wonderful thing to do as a family. So I guess in relation to business, we plan for big events, we make them happen. But once again, we don't always think about the recovery or that celebrationary time that you need after that before you move on to your next goal.
Yeah, absolutely. I hear people in my circles talking about launching. They're going to have 3 launches a year. But a launch is a little bit like climbing the mountain. You build up to this enormous peak, you bring all your people into whatever you've launched and you go through that process. But it's physically and mentally really draining. And if you roll straight from one to the next, what you miss are all the learnings in between. And I think that's, sometimes we don't allow ourselves the processing time. We're just ready right straight into the next one. But the processing is where the real shifts happen, and that's where you bed down the changes.
And I think sometimes it's also where the actual learnings happen too, when you can reflect back and go, okay, I didn't understand about the gut health, or I didn't understand that the tech was going to be an issue, or I wasn't quite sure that that was needed. Maybe I didn't hook up the payment gateway correctly, so we had issues with paying if it was a webinar or a course or something like that. Sometimes that's really as important as the pre-work, is making sure you are doing that recovery and learning those lessons. Yeah. Well, that's absolutely brilliant, Lisa. We can ask, what's the next big family goal?
Oh, that's so funny, because you've hit the nail on the head, because as soon as we've come back, we've had this, well, I say this has been on my horizon for 5 years, but it's for a year intensively. We've all trained and set that as our vision. And we came back and it almost felt like we were flapping around for a little while, a sense of what is next. Turned our sights to is our long-term goal. So my husband and I, we have a long-term dream of living aboard a sailing boat and being nomadic on the ocean. We are now working toward upskilling with our sailing adventures and getting on the water. So off the mountain and onto the water, onto a sailboat.
Fabulous. Changing our skill set slightly, that we've gone from altitude to the depths of the ocean. So that will be really interesting to see your progress. What would you say are your 3 biggest learnings in regards to business from your trip?
I would say that sometimes we think when we set a goal that we need to be ready to achieve it when we set it. We need to be able to visualize ourselves doing it and know we're capable. But you don't know what you're capable of until you've gone the course of the journey. So often we'll set a goal as something that we think we're going to do in a year's time, but we judge ourselves today as being capable or not of achieving that goal. But you today versus you in 1 year is going to be way more developed and evolved. And I know that on the mountain on that first day, I really struggled, and day 1 was the easiest day. And everyone, well, the family looked, and I looked at myself and thought, if I can't do it today, how am I going to be able to do it on summit day, 7 days' time? But 7 days later, I was a different person. I had acclimatized. So you do need to allow yourself to believe that you can change, even in a short period like 7 days, and you will be more capable. So that's my first big takeaway. The second one would be head towards your fears. Make fear your friend. I was terrified of Kilimanjaro. And in fact, I've done a heap of adventurous things in my life, and every single one of them I've been terrified of. But that terror is an opportunity to say, right, what's scaring me? What skills do I need to mitigate that fear? And what is it about this that scares me? So it's a bit of self-analysis, it's a bit of upskilling. Wherever you go towards fear, you go towards growth. So I feel that if you journey, I had a great word recently described, go head fearward. So instead of forward, head fearward. And it was just so apt. So I think set your course fearward and become really familiar with what that's all about, and you'll get in growth zone much quicker. And then finally, just build in those teams around you, because without the teams, you are just one person, and you don't need to be one person doing it alone. You need to network into the people that will have your back and support you and guide you. So we had some terrific guides on the mountain, and they were as much part of that journey as our own. So yeah, those were my 3 takeaways, my 3 business lessons.
Excellent. That's fabulous advice. I think that's really good. Okay, so now we're up to the time we do our final 5. Are you game?
I'm game.
The best advice given to you by a mentor?
I think this one would be my dad. He has given me, actually at 12 years old, so well and truly before business was on my horizon. But he gave me the little motto, know thyself. And from that point onwards, he actually had my natal astrological chart given to me as a gift at 12 years old for Christmas from my father, who was a great astrologer and reader in that area. And it was inscribed, know thyself. And for me, that set a catalyst of self-discovery. And that self-discovery has led me in, that's what set my course and my journey in life and into business. That's been the best advice ever and continues to be.
And climbing mountains as well. So
yeah.
Well done. Okay. What is the biggest help you have received since starting your business?
This is a toughie because there's so much along the way, but I really I would say my husband, this is one of those real basic things that I didn't appreciate at the time. He is a project manager and he set up all of my systems on my computer. When I first started, he was like, you need to name your folder, number your folders and do this and do this. And I was just like, oh, so boring. I just wanted to do the branding and the color schemes. And I had this voice of reason beside me saying, no, get organized, get your systems up and running, get your processes in place. And I went with it because I know that advice is good. And now 4 years later, everything is just in order. I've been able to, scale and grow whilst maintaining the simplified systems and including Excel spreadsheets. So that was like a bane of my life. But I have to say, they were so useful. So yeah, that would be probably the biggest help.
Sometimes we hate it when our husbands are right, but yes, very, very good advice. What is the one thing you have to do every day, your non-negotiable?
Hug the kid, fuss the dog, and hug the hubby.
Yay! What is your favourite business book and why?
It's not necessarily a classic business book, but Michelle Obama's Becoming. It's something I listen to. I'm a big fan of Audible. And I had her, she actually reads it to you, which is even more intimate an experience. And I just found it profoundly influential in that it's a lot about storytelling. So I bring a lot of storytelling to my work. It's where my heart sings when it comes to the writing aspect of what I do. The way she told her story, and both with lessons for life and business, it was just really inspiring and awesome book. That would be one of my favorites.
Sounds great. Our very lucky last is, what do you wish you had known when you started your business?
I would say that I focused at the beginning on skill acquisition because that's what I felt I needed. But I think, like we touched on earlier, I needed to learn how to manage my mindset. That was the biggest breakthroughs and biggest challenges have come from how to manage the mindset as opposed to the skill set. So I really think that if I'd have known more, even, what is mindset and how do I even do anything about it, would have been the things that would have really helped right at the beginning.
Be comfortable in your own skin.
Yes.
Perfect way to end. All right, that is excellent. So if anybody would like to know anything about your consulting or your writing, copywriting, etc., how do they contact you, Lisa?
Best way is connect with me on Facebook and also via email. The email address, will you link to that rather than me?
Yes, I will link to that. And what is your Facebook connection?
I am Lisa Kniebe, Words That Shine.
That's excellent. I like that. To end our little chat today, definitely Words That Shine. So thank you very much, Lisa. Appreciate your time. And I think that our SBT audience will get a lot of value from your tip.
Thanks so much for having me, Cathy. It's been awesome.
Don't forget to subscribe to Small Business Talk podcast and head on over to smallbusinesstalk.com.au/downloads for all the show notes and links to this episode. Remember, to be great, you must start. Pick one tip from today's episode, take action and implement it. Let's meet again next week at the same time and place. Until then, take action. And SBT community, enjoy your journey.